Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tamisha Darrow. I am running for Vice President and Recording Secretary of the Bermuda Union of Teachers. Today, I have with me Michelle Laylor. Michelle is one of the co-hosts of Teacher Talk. She is also a math teacher here at Cedar Bridge Academy. And I thought Michelle would be the best person for this last forum, which is around professional development, because Michelle interviews people all the time on Teacher Talk. And for me, professional development is one of the most important things that I think that we can push for, support, and champion for our teachers. Because my general philosophy in regards to professional development is that if we ensure that teachers are so well equipped with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to be able to come and deliver every day in a classroom, you spend less time having to defend them as a union. So for me, professional development, not only can it help to ensure quality instruction in the classroom, but it has a level of quality assurance around the skill set of the teacher.
Right.
So teachers that are put on review or all those types of things, well, if we as a union make sure that they are the best and the most well trained and the most well equipped, well, we don't have to worry about spending a lot of our time having to defend them in that regard. So I have a few ideas in reference to professional development that I would like to suggest if I am fortunate enough to be voted as the Vice President and or Recording Secretary. And I think it's really important and crucial at this juncture of the BPSS journey and the BUT journey as we move towards Plan 2022. There are a lot of key priorities within that document that speak to teaching and learning and what teachers have to do in order to be trained, to be equipped to deliver. So I'll let Michelle take over, and any questions that she wants to fire away at me, we're just going to have a regular conversation and center it around professional development.
Right. Because, so as you were advertising this particular portion of the journey of your campaign, you have two major focuses. One's philosophy, and the other is future vision. So I just want you to talk a little bit more about your philosophy on professional development, the union philosophy that you know about professional development, and your role. What role do you specifically play regarding professional development? And then we will move into future vision.
Okay, so my personal philosophy when it comes to professional development, first of all, I believe, people say that teaching is whether it's an art or a science, okay? I ascribe this at this juncture of my teaching profession in my career that it is more of a science than it is an art. I think art actually contributes to it. It brings the creative. It allows you to have a sense of autonomy, I guess, in what you do and what approaches you use in the classroom and nuances that you use. But for me, there's so much research around quality instruction, instructional strategies, practices, and pedagogical stances that a teacher should use in the classroom. So the days where you just kind of come in and that teacher's kind of winging it, or she's not intentional about what she's doing and saying and engaging children in, I think that those days should be less than more. So I really believe that teachers can now be in a position where, because there's so much research. So there's research around different Marzano's instructional strategies that say, for example, there's 9. It gives you the knockoff effect or the effect size or the percentile increase. Why wouldn't you, if they've tried this all over the world, the research is there to support it, why wouldn't you learn those things and add them to your craft as a teacher? Now, you could tinker with it a little bit, and that's where the art comes in, right? You might use it with some children and not all children. You might use it for this particular concept and not another, one subject and not another. But when it comes generally to professional development and teachers actually be in better position to be more intentional about what they do in the classroom, philosophically, I think now there are no longer any excuses for poor teaching, right? Yes. And so if we can ensure that teachers are the best equipped and well versed in these particular strategies or whatever it is, ideas, then the knockoff effect is that the children will benefit from it, because at the end of the day, that's what I believe. I believe that teaching is a privilege, it's not a right. Right? And so if it's a privilege, then the privilege of you calling yourself an educator has to be backed up with something.
Okay.
Right? It has to be backed up so that the children's lives are better because you were in it.
Okay.
And if the lives are not better because you were in it, if no learning has happened, and you're just saying, I taught this, and no learning has happened, then really, can you call yourself a teacher?
Okay.
That type of thing.
Yes.
You know, and recognizing that children come with social stuff, and I get all of that. But my whole thing is that when it comes to teaching, and even and how the union kind of factors into that, is I believe that the union stands on two legs. It stands on trade unionism, and it stands on professional development. The trade unionism part is what should kick in when the other stuff didn't go right. It shouldn't be the first stop. It shouldn't be our first go-to.
Right.
So a teacher shouldn't have to scramble through a CBA, for example, because of something that happened in the classroom. That was, you know what I mean? If they come with the A game in the classroom, that's why I said it's more proactive instead of reactive as far as professional development. You don't have to defend them later on. Right.
I do.
And so my whole philosophy around that is that I believe that teachers should be the best and the brightest. I believe that teaching is a privilege. So if we are privileged to do so, we need to be equipped with everything that we can be so that these children can benefit from a quality education. Okay. So that's why I believe it's more of a science than an art. Yes. And that's why I believe that philosophically that it is our way out for children to be placed in front of teachers that are the most and best and brightest and well equipped when it comes to the stand. So specifically, I think that you asked what specifically can the union do, or what I'm interested in is bringing back a sense of how do we re-professionalize our teachers that want it. Right. Or that need it and deserve it. Right. So I am definitely interested in instituting learning institutes. For the whole year, which will be a series of workshops and modules and intensives that teachers can choose to come to. Okay. So they can choose to come to around teaching practices. So just putting out a whole yearly plan, and teachers can choose to come after school or on Saturdays to these particular workshops to get quality professional development. I think a huge portion of the union's budget should directly be earmarked for professional development. I think teachers should be even further supported financially when they want to go overseas for professional development, but that's only if that professional development cannot be offered here locally. Okay. So I think that we definitely have the skill set here in Bermuda to facilitate quality PD. But let's say you wanted to do something that we couldn't find anybody in Bermuda that had that particular skill set, then that's where the union then will come and help to assist. Yes. But having weekly sessions, a weekly catalog of course options that teachers can take is definitely something that I'm interested in. And I think sprinkled within that is also workshops that have to do with unionism. Knowing your rights, right? As a teacher, because that too is important. We talked with the high school teachers yesterday, and a lot of their consternation is around antisocial behavior and how to protect themselves from antisocial behavior. They also talked about how do we have almost like support groups for teachers that are put on admin leave, for example. So I'm talking about professional development around that as well, right? How to have or to hold sessions for teachers who need to know how to protect themselves. Sessions for teachers that are put on admin leave, you know, those types of things. So it's the kind of the total.
Because many of the things that you're talking about is what's relevant for today. Yeah. Because that is about the 21st century, because before 20 years ago, a lot of the things that are happening now because of societal changes, or we didn't have to worry about that. So what you're saying is, because you're to me, I hear that you're speaking on the topic of future vision.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so that will be a part of the focus, the future vision part.
Yeah, it's about positioning our teachers for the future. Yeah. Plan 2022 has some expectations for teachers.
Can you talk about a little bit about the Plan 2022, how that works in tandem with professional development?
So I was actually a part of the ambassador design team for Plan 2022. And actually from the recommendation of the union, I'll go back a little further. From the recommendation of the union, I actually served on the Board of Education as the BUT's representative. While I was on the Board of Education, I had the opportunity to be a part of the selection process for the consultant and vendor who will lead us through Plan 2022. Okay, looking at a strategic vision for Bermuda Public School System. So I was involved with that process from its inception, from the RFP process all the way to the end. So I sat around that table with ministry officials, and we selected who we thought should be the vendor who will do a good job of moving us through the strategic plan. And hence, we had selected Dr. Jeremiah Newell, who did a fantastic job. It was a very grassroots type experience, full of community conversations, in which, and I was also one of the community conversation facilitators. We were sent all over Bermuda to interview different Bermudians in reference to their vision for Bermuda Public School System over the next few years. So in part of that journey, there were 5 key priorities that came out of each of the of Plan 2022. And specifically in key priority 3, which is what I specifically contributed to, meaning I worked with a group, right? And we came up with the recommendations around that area. It was the whole idea of re-professionalizing teachers, but not just teachers. It was ministry officials and also school leaders, right? So it's the whole gamut. How do we equip people with the skills that they need for a 21st century education system? And so one of the things that is not common knowledge was when we were sitting down to articulate the strategies around particular key priority number 3, which talks about teaching and learning and school leadership, was one of the ideas that I had was the idea around a highly qualified teacher designation. And I'll talk a little bit about that. My idea in reference to that was, you know how we're on the cycle of PGP, you're on admin monitoring, some people's on review. Well, my idea was to add a 4th part to that cycle, and that would have been the highly qualified teacher designation, which would mean that every 4 years, teachers would have to have taken a series of modules or classes that would be taught and sanctioned by the ministry, which would help to calibrate the quality of instruction in Bermuda. So every 4 years, you would have to take, within those 4 years, and you didn't have to wait until the 4 years to do it, right? You could do one module 1 year, one the next, but it was pretty much 5 classes. One would have been in classroom management, instructional strategies, temperament and disposition for the profession. So I never worked out the kinks as to what those modules would be, but that was the thinking behind that will be added to the highly qualified teaching designation is actually in Plan 2022. But how it's spelled out on how it would look was not articulated inside the plan. So also professional development around the Danielson framework is also in the plan. So these ideas are not new and novel as far as they're actually embedded within the plan. So for me, it's like, okay, so as the vice president, I need to take the plan and I need to pull it apart, and I need to start helping to position teachers so that they are able to be ready for this or engage in it or know what's coming down the pipeline. We don't have to wait for the ministry. There are things that we can do. So I think a lot of our stance, I feel like we're sliding away. I feel like a lot of our stance has been reactive. I think our union, yes, it sits on a legacy of 100 years, but I'm not totally convinced that we have been as proactive as we could be in supporting our teachers.
Now I had 2 things that they came to mind as you were talking. And you were talking about how you were speaking with high school teachers, and you're talking about how we can guard ourselves towards antisocial behavior. I'm going to speak specifically to subjects and content right now. And I find through my experience that there is a disconnect between the different levels, between preschool and primary school, middle and high school. I do not find through experience that each part knows enough about the other. I've had the privilege of being in the different parts of
different levels of
the different levels of education, and I find that there's kind of like a disconnect. Is there any plans for that to have to put the connection together? Like, for example, some professional development in that, like with middle school teachers sitting with primary school teachers in their subject area and seeing how they can bridge that gap between the two.
I think we can actually be closer to that now with 7th space grading actually.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because even next week when we have planned the SVG PD, the middle school teachers will be doing PD with the primary school teachers in P5 and P6 for mathematics, right? So we've already started to develop through our team those articulations between the year levels, right? So the 5s and 6s will also be with the middle school teachers. And I think more of those opportunities need to happen. Interestingly enough, another thing that came up yesterday though was, how do we use the Bermuda Union of Teachers Conference Day for those type of opportunities as well, right? So the SBG is coming under the ministry and SBG initiative, right? But to me, the conference is the prime time in which you want to use those types of opportunities. Having chaired the conference for 3 years, back to philosophy.
Yes.
The conference, when I was the conference chair, only offered professional development that you could directly take into your classroom tomorrow. That is something that I feel strongly about. I'm sorry, that I feel agree that happened earlier. That's something that I feel strongly about, to ensure that that one day that we get, that it is the best day that a teacher can have in reference to taking new skills back to the classroom. The other reason why I'm adamant about how that day should be spent around professional development is because that's a taxpayer day. Right? People are paying for us to not teach that day, so that hopefully we're learning more about being better teachers. So for me, it was also a moral thing to make sure that what teachers were doing on that day, since it's taxpayer dollars for us to be out, that we use it for the benefit of the taxpayers' children, right? And so for me, the whole idea around the conference for those 3 years was just for that reason. How do we create opportunities so that teachers are better because they were with us? And the conference just grew and grew and grew, as far as we went from 1 day to 2 days, and we had on our third year 11 offerings over those 3 and 4 days. There were 11 events that we had, and for me it was one of the most rewarding experiences that I had, because I really had an opportunity to do something that I love. And even when I left the executive, because I served on it for 3 years, and when I stepped away, that was one of the things that I made sure to thank the president about, our current president, Shannon James. I thanked him because he offered me that position, right? And he didn't have to do that. So obviously he saw that I had something to offer in that regard, and I'm appreciative, because I learned so much from that experience. Yes, I wanted everybody to have great PD, and I wanted it to be perfect and all of those things. But even on the other side of it, it was probably one of the most rewarding and valuable experiences that I ever had. Very difficult. A lot of heavy lifting, but I have no regrets about that. So that is, using those spaces and places for teachers to collaborate and work together is very important to me. So developing more ideas around that. So after school opportunities for teachers to get training, and also on the weekends. But one of the things I'm interested in with PD is then using local presenters. We have the quality here.
I do remember when you were taking lead of the conferences that you made a point to have local presenters.
Absolutely.
And as you said earlier, invite anyone that's international if it was if it was something that was needed. It wasn't as if we decided that you knew that you had confidence in who we are as Bermudians. Presenting on local or resident teachers, with our skill set.
Yeah, and there were overseas consultants, facilitators that will reach out and say, I heard you're having a conference, or I came last year, and I'm like, thanks, but I'm really trying to use my people, and I think that we have to recognize the talent that is here in Bermuda. We have some dynamic teachers, we have some passionate and committed professionals, and so for me it was like, okay, so let's put them out there and let's do what they have to do. And so that experience and working with those facilitators and even the team very near and dear to my heart because it was such a rewarding experience. And the feedback from the teachers when they went to the first one and the second and then the third, and they were like, can you keep, can you top this? Can you make it any better? And I remember Shannon saying to me, one of the benefits of doing the conference is that you can see it grow and bloom over the years, right? So you have your opportunity and then you hand it off to somebody else and you see where they can take it. And for me, it was a very rewarding experience. One thing we haven't touched on, Michelle, that I definitely wanted to get across today, though, was the idea of teachers that are on review. Right. Teachers that are on review, I'm very interested in how do we then support those teachers through professional development.
You touched on it briefly earlier, but you didn't make it specific.
Yeah, a few years ago, I had probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I had actually written into the ministry a proposal around how do we support teachers that are on review. We recognize that that neophyte teachers, brand new teachers, that they're automatically given a mentor, right? If they are Bermudian. If they're not Bermudian, they are not given a mentor. That's in our collective bargaining agreement, which is something that probably needs to change in regards to that as well. But teachers that are on review, my proposal suggested that if a teacher is placed on review, that at the union, we would have a list of names of master teachers who volunteer to mentor the teachers that are on review. If you're on review, you don't have to take advantage of that opportunity, because in order for you to, it wasn't a case of the ministry just calling up the union and saying, hey, we have 4 teachers on review, who are you going to assign them to? That teacher would have to opt in. They would have to say, it's okay for you to notify the union that I'm on review. Or they can come in and get assistance, because that's a personnel, that's the personal information, and that becomes a personnel issue. So when I had reached out to the director at that time, and that was the feedback that they had given me, that they just couldn't give the names over, that is a program that I would really like to start. Those teachers that are on review, if they are interested in being mentored by a master teacher, how can we establish those relationships? And what can we do to support those teachers? The other thing I wanted to do in regards to that was set up a program where a select number of teachers from Bermuda Public School System can become certified Danielson observers. And so if there's a cost connected to it, I think it's about $400 for a person to be observed. But the reason why I wanted these teachers trained as certified observers is so if you have a teacher that's on review, or if you have a teacher that's constantly getting negative evaluations based on the observations of the principal, we can send that teacher in, that's the certified observer, who has the calibrated training around what quality instruction looks like, to go and observe in that classroom and give that teacher feedback. Sometimes it could be the case of maybe the principal didn't even know what they were looking for. Now, we're hoping that's not the case.
I mean, that's because we have specialists in different content areas. So, and also you're talking about utilizing all our resources. So I think, hearing you, I think it's unfair to just place everything on administration, to do everything, and especially when you have others that can, fill in.
So that was my thinking with the certified Danielson observer, was that these teachers can go in and they can observe the teacher based on their request, the teacher's request, and give them some feedback based on the Danielson framework on things that they can do to improve. So I've always had ideas running around in my head when it came to how do we improve teachers, and that's back to the whole idea of my philosophy about teaching being a privilege. I believe that if you are a teacher, you have to be a good one, and always aspiring to be a great one, right? I don't think that for any stretch of the imagination along our career and our journey should we ever sit on our laurels. We should be constantly learning, constantly improving. Doctors, they're professionals, we are professionals, and they're constantly re-professionalizing themselves, right? And so having the opportunity to provide via the union these professional development opportunities is really, really near and dear to my heart. I understand that not everybody's into PD. I get it and I understand, but in this profession, we have to be our best, right? And so we have to be reflective about what it is that we're doing and not doing, and we have to be open and honest about why are we here? What is our purpose? And that our students should be better because they were with us. Right, and if they're not, then we need to start doing some things for them to be better.
Talk on grooming administrators. Do you have enough time for that?
Yeah, sure, we do. So, school leadership sometimes in Bermuda can be a bit problematic. And what I mean by that is the requirements for school leadership is currently is that you don't have to have any training in educational leadership. I don't know
well,
if most people
to
know
me,
that,
the
right?
perception is if you're a good teacher, you're a good administrator.
Yeah.
That's the perception.
Yeah. But normally, if you're in other districts, that doesn't happen. You have to have training in educational leadership, and that's not what we have in our current requirements. I think they're actually going to be moving towards that very soon. But I say all that to say that also circling back to Plan 2022, one of the things that's written in there, I think it's 60%. I might be wrong. It's either 60 or 65% of all school leaders should have a degree in educational leadership.
Okay.
Right. And so, of course, you're not going to fire the current principals that we have, and some of them are doing a fantastic job, right? But the whole idea is that when you're hiring these new ones, you want to make sure that they have the skills, right? So, because you want to get to that 65%. Right. And so there is a different level of dialogue that you can have with someone that has had training in educational leadership as a leader. There are professional philosophies and stances that you develop. When I was taking my master's in educational leadership, you learn so much about how to lead a building, how to lead an organization. You're just not supplanted from being, okay, so the reading teacher, and the next week you're in charge of a school building. You actually, there are things that you take classes around data and how to use data to improve instruction, classes around how to coach and how to facilitate PD, classes around how to allocate resources, time and money, which is the two main resources in a school. You take classes on how to implement new initiatives at your school and what happens when they plateau. You take classes around how to ensure quality instructions in the classroom, classes around learning. I mean, these are specific classes that are directly related to how to lead a school.
I thought about, as you were saying that, I thought about another PD opportunity, teachers working with paraprofessionals, resource teachers, learning support teachers. Like, I feel that right there is something a void that needs to be filled.
That whole idea of collaboration needs to be addressed.
Yes.
People are always talking about Finnish schools and how good Finland is and all of that. They are. But half of the day is PD.
Right.
Half of the day is collegial conversations. Yes. Half of the day is planning with someone because they recognize that it takes the collective capacity of people working together in order to reach a common goal. And for us, we have these silos that we work in. It's not necessarily because people want to. The structures are there that promote it, right? We don't have places and spaces for people to come together. Right. We have places and spaces for people to be apart, right? And so I just think that the union has the organization has so much potential. Yes. To really be responsive to the needs of its members, and to be able to set up programs and communication and just places and spaces where teachers can learn and grow and bloom. I recognize that the efficacy of teachers and also the morale of teachers is low. I recognize that. But when you get people together that's working together towards a common goal, and I can bear your burden and you can bear my burden, we have a collective vision, that we're aspiring towards. It helps in the journey. This whole teaching thing is tough. So the idea that we would do it alone, that we could do it alone, and that we could be half as successful without working with each other is error in that thinking, right? So for me, I'm really excited and hopeful that if elected, that is one of the main things that I would champion for teachers, is the idea around how do we equip our members to be the best and the brightest. So our students can be the best and the brightest.
All right.
Yeah, definitely interested in that. So, Michelle, thank you so much for facilitating.
Thank you for inviting me.
For facilitating this conversation today. All of the other videos, here we go with the lights again. All of the other videos have been uploaded to YouTube. We've had an opportunity. This is the last in the series of 6 in our forums. Our first conversation was with paraprofessionals, where we had a chance to talk about their concerns. That was with Josine Butterfield. Then we had a chance, we had Joe on Tuesday. And then we had a chance to talk to Shaquita Parson, and she led us through conversations about the issues and challenges for middle and primary school teachers. Then we had a chance to talk to Kelly Douglas. Kelly talked to us about SBG and you and how that affects you as a member and implementation of standards-based grading. We talked to via WhatsApp pretty much Makiva Stowe and the deputy reps, and Shaquita helped to facilitate that again as the admin rep. And we talked about the issues surrounding deputy principals, non-teaching deputies. We had Keisha Allen Smith on earlier this week, and we talked about the issues that high schoolers have challenges with, and I gave some suggestions and solutions on what I would like to do and see happen as a member of the executive. And then finally, we have Michelle on today, who led us through this whole PD journey and kept me focused because I could talk about PD all day. So thank you for listening in. I hope that you really do consider me as a viable option for vice president or recording secretary of the Bermuda Union of Teachers. I think that substance is something that I will bring to the executive. I tend to be very focused about the things that I think are important for our members and for education as a whole. Love teaching, the absolute best thing that I've ever done in my life. So I hope that you will consider voting for me next week when you go to the polls. And hopefully I'll see you along the journey. Thanks so much for watching.